My name is Ann DeRogie. I'm the park historian. I'd like to welcome you here on to Women's Rights National Park on International Women's History Day. Just as the Wesleyan Methodists in Seneca Falls provided an impartial space for open discussion to a wide variety of speakers in the 1840s, so too does the park in the 21st century. Today, I would like to introduce you to Adrienne Emo, who will be telling you about today's event. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank the park for hosting us again this year. We love coming here. It's the proper place to be. I would like to introduce the Women's Institute for Leadership and Learning, one of the hosts today, along with Mayor Diana Smith and myself and Marilyn Tedeschi from Rochester. We founded the Institute in 2008 to umbrella the Seneca Falls Dialogues. And today we're hosting together with the Women's Interfaith Institute, founded by Reverend Dr. Allison Stokes, who's hiding outside in the hallway. And so we welcome you here today. The program structure will be such that I'm going to call for Nadia Shahram and for Elizabeth Cady Staton to come in just a few moments. They will begin their dialogue, and after the dialogue, Dr. Stokes will then moderate question and answer period. After we finish that, we would welcome you, and please do come with us to the Hotel Gould, which is just a short few steps away from here. We are having a buffet luncheon for $10.95, and we hope that you can join us. So, here we are today. I would, at this time, like to caution you about one thing. You all remember Elizabeth Cady Staton, I'm sure, and you all see her with those gray, curls all over her head, and for some reason there's always that picture. But remember, she was only 33 years old in her time here in Seneca Falls. And so, at this time, I would like you not to be shocked by this young woman that's going to come forward, but I would like to introduce Elizabeth Cady Staton and Nadia Shahram. Welcome, ladies. Thank you. I'd like to tell you a little about both of our participants today. Elizabeth Cady Staton, Dr. Melinda Grube, is a student of the history of human rights activism and free thought in the Finger Lakes region. As an adjunct professor, Melinda teaches history at Cayuga Community College in Auburn, New York, and gives historical presentations celebrating 19th century New York State reformers. Dr. Grube's research focus is the intersection of radical human rights activism and spirituality in the burned-over district of the state of New York. She received her PhD with concentration in women's studies and religion from the Union Institute and University. In the past 3 years, Melinda has portrayed Elizabeth Cady Staton for us each of our International Women's Day events. In 2011, she was in dialogue with Mayor Diana Smith, and their topic was a dialogue on leadership, Seneca Falls, 163 years later. Then in 2012, there was a dialogue on reason, religion, and Mrs. Stanton's Bible with Reverend Dr. Allison Stokes. Last year, we were very fortunate to present Mrs. Stanton with Dr. Judith Pfeiffer, who is in our audience today. The topic that time was Reaching for the Sky, Women's Equality, Is It Rocket Science? So we thank Melinda for her dedication to this annual endeavor. I know she puts a lot of time and effort into this for us. One last comment I would say about her is something that I told some of you that were here last year. I was looking at a survey of her students who wrote that she was a wonderful teacher, that they love her class, that she teaches in themes and not in memorization dates. But one student wrote, "Ugh, don't take her class. She's a feminist." Next, we come to Nadia Shahram. Nadia is an attorney, writer, educator, activist, and adjunct faculty at the Buffalo Law School. Nadia received her BS from the University of Buffalo and her Juris Doctorate from SUNY Buffalo Law School. She was trained and licensed as a divorce and family mediator at the Rochester Mediation Center, and right after the tragic events of September 11, Nadia started questioning the role of Muslims in the image of Islam. At the law school, Shahram teaches effective religion and culture on family laws in Eastern countries. In 2010, she published her book, Marriage on the Street Corners of Tehran, a novel based on true stories of Iranian Muslim women facing legal and cultural inequality in everyday life as well as in courtrooms. Nadia has received multiple awards for her practice and activist work, including the Buffalo Business First Legal Elite of Western New York and Women of Influence Awards. Buffalo Public Schools recognized her with an Education and Culture Award, and the Family Justice Center also presented her with the Spirit of Woman Award. Nadia is the board member of New York State Council on Divorce Mediation and a board member of the Family Justice Center and a member of the Women and Erie County Bar. Nadia is also going to be entertaining us this summer at Convention Days, and I'm not going to tell you what she's going to be doing. That's the enticement to come to lunch, and perhaps we can persuade her to tell us a little bit about what she proposes to do for us in Seneca Falls in July of this year. So at this time, I would like to present them again, and I would like Nadia to tell Elizabeth Cady Staton why she's here today.
Thank you. I think before I say why I'm here, I have to tell you that you look absolutely beautiful, and I'm just wondering, how are you carrying yourself around with so much fabric around you?
Not easily. I am very, very jealous of your trousers.
Well, you look beautiful, and I have to say that sometimes when I go to special occasions for dancing, I actually dress like you.
Do you?
Yes, I do. So even though now we have the freedom to dress this way, but it will be nice that we go back sometimes to the past and we pull out something from the closet that looks just like you.
Oh, well, sometimes when I'm at home taking care of my children, I dress just like you.
Well, we have some connections, I guess. There is a lot of commonality between us, not just the way perhaps we dress at home, also the way we have taught many battles in the past and presently. I have to say that I am just a little bit intimidated to be here and sitting next to you. You are one of my ideals, and you are definitely the motivations behind me being here in Seneca Falls.
You were my motivation for starting the work in the first place.
Thank you, and I promised myself not to do this, but I'm sorry. I'll be okay. Several years ago, when I discovered you and Seneca Falls, I just cannot keep myself away from Seneca Falls. And I teach at the UB Law School, University of Buffalo. And 5 years ago, I started a project at the university with my young lawyers, to be lawyers, about what can we do today as Muslim women. So this is a question for me and my Muslim audience, that what can we do as lawmakers to try to make it easier for women in courtrooms, having in mind your examples, your footsteps, and learning not from what women have done in Muslim nations, but also what women have done all around the world, and in particular, someone like you in Seneca Falls. And what we came about to create is declaration of equalities in courtrooms for Muslim women, and which will be dedicated to what you have done in Seneca Falls, to you and those who came before you and those who came also after you.
Well, this is very interesting to me because it is true that actually when we began this work, we were thinking not just of our own generation, but of our daughters' and granddaughters' generations. And as we continued to discuss our legal disabilities, in particular in the context of our social disabilities, our position within our family and within our churches, we realized that we needed to open the doors to more and more women And when I hear about women achieving as you have achieved, it feels very gratifying. I studied law as a child, from childhood to through my adulthood. I had an unusual childhood in that my mother had 11 babies, and 6 of them died. All of my brothers died. My oldest brother lived almost into adulthood and passed away when I was 10 years old. And my father, who was a lawyer and who had planned to take Eliezer under his wing and make him part of that life, was so devastated. I would go to the cemetery and watch my father stretch himself out on Eliezer's grave. And I remember those days right after my brother died, and going and sitting on my father's lap and leaning against him, and having him put his arm very mechanically around me, and listening to his heartbeat, and listening to him sigh. And he said, "I wish you were a boy." And I said, "I will be everything a son would be to you." But my father knew that couldn't be true. I didn't know. And my father always was telling me in subtle ways that it wasn't good enough for me. I could never be my brother. There was a minister who lived next door, Reverend Hosack. And I went to him and I told him I wanted to be as good as my brother. And he told me that girls were as good as boys. And he would take a girl over a boy any day. And he taught me Greek, and we gardened together, and he was always praising me and my accomplishments in front of my father. And every time I'd go to my father with these accomplishments, he would just sigh again and say, "You should have been a boy." And when it came time for me to go to school, I wanted to go away like my brother had. And I wanted to continue studying law, which I studied in my father's law office with his law students. And I would listen to the women who came in and would complain about their disabilities. One woman in particular, Flora Campbell, she was a widow, and her husband had willed her property to her son. And her son gave her an allowance not large enough for her to live on. And she came to my father and asked for his help. And I remember how much he wanted to help her, and he couldn't do it. And I remember listening to these women who would come in and hearing them cry. And I would complain to him how unfair it was. And he would take down those law books, and he would show me the law. And he would say, "There is nothing we can do." But he said, "Maybe one day you'll go to the legislators and you'll tell them to change the law."
I say we have a lot more in common than I thought so. I was born and raised in a family of 6 girls. And my father always told us that he felt that he had 6 jewels. And I remember very well when my youngest sister, who is 10 years younger than I, was born. I started crying, and I ran to my father. And I said that I was just crying, and I was just saying that my mom had another girl. And my dad couldn't understand what I'm saying, so he just slapped my face. He slapped me and said that, "Slow down, what are you saying? Did something happen to your mom?" Because my mom was in the hospital room. And I said, no, she's okay, but we had another girl. Here is 10 years, almost 10 years old. And I said, "We have another girl." And I was very sad because I saw the way my aunt and my cousins, female, at the hospital, they reacted to the news that my mother had the 6th girl. And I thought my dad will be upset too. And I remember that night that my dad said, "We have 6 jewels, you are 6 jewels for me." And that has stayed all along with me. anytime I want to do something that is related to women, related to equality, related to justice, I call my parents who live in California, in Los Angeles, and I always check with them. And I always have their image in front of me, even right now. I know they're watching me, and they will, of course, watch the video later on. That they're telling me that as long as you put your heart and your mind in it, don't get away from the path that you have started for yourself after 9/11. That's the time that I decided to revisit my faith of Islam and see what has happened to the image of a holy book, of a great religion, of a peaceful religion, as a result of some of the practitioners who are not respecting the words of the Prophet. And of course, when you were talking about these stories that women were crying in your father's law office, it sounds like some of the stories that I wrote about that I came across women when I was visiting my native country of Iran in 2004 and 2005, and I came face to face with some of these women who were truly sobbing in courtrooms, and they were kind of pleading with the judge, with the male clergy judges, to either divorce them because they were in a horrible, abusive, loveless marriage, or because of many other reasons, but they didn't have the power to divorce because of the fact that they're females. So we have come a long way since you were in your dad's law firm, but we have a long way to go still.
I think my father was always very conflicted because of his faith and because of his great respect for the law. And he would show me the law and he would tell me, he would agree that the law wasn't fair to women, but he never showed any sign that he himself wanted to change the laws. And when I showed him that I wanted to become the one who did, he backed away from his support of me very rapidly. As a girl, he would actually come and interrupt my embroidery and hand me a law book to read. And I think he was so proud of my interest. But when I decided to speak publicly about women's rights, particularly in law, I think I would say it was his reputation, but I know him better than that. I know that it wasn't his reputation he feared, it was my reputation he wanted to protect. They teased me, my father and his law students. They would read the worst laws they could find in the law books. Henry Baird, who was the brother of my brother-in-law, would joke about things. For instance, I came in one day with a beautiful coral necklace I was so proud of, and he said, "Now, in due time, if you should become my wife, I could take that and sell it and maybe buy a box of cigars and you could watch your necklace go up in smoke." And they thought that was hilarious, but I most certainly did not. I confronted my father's religion. He was a stern Calvinist, and my childhood was all about hell. I feared the devil more than anything else until I was older. As a teenage girl, he tried to instruct me to become more rational, but that background of his Calvinist faith haunted me until I began to encounter other individuals, Garrett Smith, for instance, who introduced me not only to a more religiously liberal perspective, but also to women who were suffering from disabilities far worse than mine. One day when I was a young woman finished with my schooling, such as it was, he had me come upstairs, and very, very quietly we went upstairs, and he opened the door and he said, "I want you to meet Harriet." And there was a young woman in there, and she had escaped from slavery, and she had been assaulted in slavery. And I did not know about these things before. This changed and deepened my perspective of women's disabilities, not only within marriage, but within all of their sexual relationships with men. And that in that time period when I fell in love with Henry Stanton, when my father and my brother-in-law said, don't marry him, because he was an abolitionist, and they're bad news, but also because they said, you will lose all your rights when you get married. And I married him anyway, but we took out the word obey, because obey in my time meant that whenever your husband wanted you, you had to submit not only your property, but your body to him whenever he wanted. And there was nothing you could do. There was no abuse that you could not escape that marriage. And so that word, I hated that word, obey.
I hate that word too. And it is so funny that we are talking about that particular word here. A couple of years ago, very recently, in a court in New York State, I am not sure at what level. It wasn't an appeal court. I think it was in New Jersey. I am not sure, so please don't quote me on that. But a Muslim woman went to court complaining about her husband raping her against her wishes. And so these were unwanted sexual intercourse with her day after day. And the judge, without knowing really the culture, without knowing the religion that the husband was using as a defense, the judge said that he is not guilty of the crime of rape because it is his culture, and he's under the impression that he's allowed under religion and culture, which is totally wrong. And of course, there was a turnover when this case went to a higher level court. But I think that at all generations, whether it was your generation or my generation and all in between, we women do not like to use that word. And some of you can correct me if I'm wrong here. And I would take it, men do not like to use that word also. I don't know of any man who would say, I would obey you, my wife, for the rest of our marriage and lives. When you were referring to religion and your dad's reaction, and perhaps what he was worrying or fearing was perhaps more for you than for himself, after 9/11, the tragedy of 9/11 in our country here, when I really wanted to start the quest of learning more about my faith and learning about the image versus the faith itself, my parents told me, and especially my mom, that you are going to lose some of your friends from your own community, meaning Muslim community, meaning Iranian community. And just as long as you are remaining true to your belief, we are with you. But I wouldn't do a good job as a mom if I do not warn you. And I went into it with the full knowledge that I am going to turn off some of my own friends, and especially some Muslims, my friends, colleagues, that they totally stop communicating with me. And they said that what I have said in my book, which is all about current laws being practiced in Islamic countries such as Iran, and they say, no, it's not true any longer. And then privately, they have told me that even though it is true, why do you have to talk about it? I am a mother of 2 absolutely precious daughters. I had wonderful grandmas, and I have a wonderful supportive mother. And I feel, now that I know about it, now that I know what the true faith is and what the image is and what some bad practitioners have done to the image, if I don't do something about it, shame on me. And even though my daughters are still too young to appreciate perhaps what I'm doing, but I know in the future, perhaps when they have children themselves, and when they look back, perhaps they may think that, oh, we are so glad that our mom did such a thing. I do believe in starting something as soon as you know yourself, regardless of the reactions. And hopefully it could be cultivated, in the future generation perhaps would benefit from what little I have started. And of course, we are definitely benefiting. Just the fact that we are sitting here because of what you and your contemporaries have done in your generation.
I think very few people remember that divorce reform and the rights of women within their marriages was at least as important to me as the vote.
Mm-hmm.
That throughout my career, beginning in the 1850s in particular, when I was working with the temperance women, they said that the way to stop abuse in marriage is to get men to stop drinking. And I said the way to end divorce or the way to end abuse was to allow divorce. I believe that women should have the right to divorce their husband for any reason, but particularly in cases of cruelty and alcoholism. Mm-hmm. I saw women in my own community in Seneca Falls who were beaten by their husbands and had no way of escaping it. I became passionate about this issue and revisited it again and again all the way to the end of my life. The last thing I published was on this topic. I am passionate about the rights of women in their most precious relationships. As mothers and as partners, they need to feel safe. And I knew that men would never have respect for women if women were treated as though they were prostitutes in their own weddings, in their own marriages. So I became involved in some cases in the late 19th century that were very scandalous cases of women being women losing custody of their children after they'd been thrown downstairs. One woman in particular was thrown downstairs and placed in an insane asylum when she questioned her husband and his abusive and adulterous behavior. Another woman was convicted of infanticide and sentenced to death by an all-male jury. Mm-hmm. These were cases that were of great concern to me. But the right of women to have possession of their own bodies, and within the context of our faith, that people said that women had to obey, that they had to submit because of God and because of law. And I realized that the reason we couldn't make any headway was because we needed to combine so many things together. We needed to have political rights so that we could move into the legislators and begin to change the laws. We needed to have religious freedom so that we used rationalism instead of superstition to create laws. We needed to look at the condition and history of our religions. We needed to do this rationally. We needed to do it without fear. We needed to be open as our country became more diverse. We needed to change the way the family itself worked. And you talked about your friends moving away from you, and my friends did as well. And by the time I was an old woman, I had lost many, many friends who were deeply offended when I challenged their religion and when I challenged the law, and especially when I challenged marriage itself. Mm-hmm. But I would do it again.
I'm very happy to hear that, and thank you for saying those words, because it does give me more courage to continue what I have begun. I cannot think of any example but to say what my father has told me, that one day this young person sees a very old man planting a tree of walnut. And we all know walnut trees, it takes generations for it to become fruitful. And the young child asked the old man, "What are you doing? Are you too old to understand that you're not going to see anything as a result of your work today?" And the old man says that, "No, but you will." And adding on top of that, what you're saying, not to be discouraged, definitely I am going to use help of those of my friends who do believe in equality between sexes, in particular in courtrooms. And I think law is important because many people look to the law. Many people look for protection to the courtrooms, especially in 21st century. And it is important for us to make sure that our laws are not biased in courtrooms. And hopefully for generations to come, we can change culture. Culture is what is the hardest to change. But again, I am sure that we will be able to do that as well.
Oh, your story about the walnut tree reminds me that we are sowing winter wheat that other hands than ours will harvest.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And to remember, too, that there were always allies. Mm-hmm. There were always allies as well as people who stood against me. And I could not have gone on without those people. So many of them whose names are lost. And, you know, it isn't just the other suffragists who stood with me or the editors who published my stories. It's the women who came into my father's law office, who, even though the law stood against them and their own family stood against them, had the courage to tell their stories out loud for me to hear them. In so many ways, they are the ones who changed the world.
Mm-hmm. I think that for me, Seneca Falls, I have to say that plays an important role in what I have decided to go ahead with this summer. Because I have been thinking and sitting really on this project since 9/11. But after discovering Seneca Falls, I feel this is like Mecca for women. This is where women can feel free intellectually to reach as high as they want to. And of course, they have you as an example right here. And many, many women who are here in the audience that I'm blessed to have them as my friends, as my colleagues, and as people who will support the project. And I know that at the same time that I have gained more friendship among perhaps groups that I didn't expect to have more friends, and I have lost some friends, but it's still hurtful. I cannot sit here and say that, you know, it's a happy occasion. It's still hurtful that why can't we support the same cause? Right now, I do have a case in Buffalo that husband, after nearly 40 years of marriage, has gone ahead and married a second wife, second woman. And the community knows about it. And of course, I am representing now the first wife who has decided finally to divorce the the husband, even though she doesn't want to. But because she feels she is just totally insulted by the fact that the husband has gone public about the second marriage. Almost nobody is doing anything about it. So our only hope is the court. Our only hope is the courtrooms, American courtrooms, that she can stand tall and beautiful as the first wife who has all the rights. And the husband has absolutely no right in our American courtroom to have a second wife. But the community doesn't see it that way. And it is the mind of the community that unfortunately will come last to change. So I am going ahead with changing the laws, hopefully, and then culture and tradition will follow for the younger generation.
The culture and the tradition have to follow along, and the law is a product of our intellect. And if he gave me anything, my father gave me confidence in my intellect. If he couldn't follow along with me because of his culture, I can at least take pride in the fact that I was the child he wanted. He may not have known it, but I was the child he wanted. And I spent my whole life doing what I knew was right, even when everyone around me, my husband, my father, my friends, even when they turned against me. And there were times when I thought that maybe I could not go on. But in the end, I followed what I knew was right. And there were people who stood up in audiences and they challenged me. They said, "Where are your children?" And I said, "It takes as much time for me to be here giving a speech as it takes for you to listen. And where are your children?" And there was one man who said, "My wife has given me 8 beautiful children. Don't you think that it's a better thing for a wife and mother to do to produce sons for her husband than to waste her time on suffrage talk?" And I looked at him head to toe, and I said, "I know of very few men who are worth repeating 8 times." But to keep a sense of humor when your friends are turning away from you, and to remember to follow what you know is right in your heart and with your head is the most important thing. And if I hadn't done it, maybe you wouldn't be doing what you were doing.
Mm-hmm. I do agree with you on that, and I cannot help but to wish that one of your contemporaries, who was from Iran, Tahireh, who was here also, and she could have told us that just one act of her in at the same time as yours in 1800, when she removed her head cover in the assembly of all men, and she created such a shock wave in that particular assembly of men, and later on, which was more like emancipation of Iranian women, at the same time that she said, I think that her most famous quote is that when they were killing her, she said that you can stop me, you can kill me, but you cannot stop emancipation of Iranian women. And when I was telling my mother this morning on the way here, when I called her and I told her that I'm on my way and I'm coming here, and she said that you go for it, because even though in Iran under the current regime they have cement the mouth and the tongue of women, I mean literally, because as soon as you talk about equality, then you could disappear as a woman. And even though we have many brave Iranian women, many brave Muslim women, along with some Muslim men who are trying, and to push harder for equality, especially in courtrooms, but is still not enough. And so my mom wish both of us well, and we hope that we can continue with the same level of energy that you and you and women like Tahireh brought in that era.
I acted for Margaret, my daughter, and for Harriet, and I acted for your generation too. And I can see that you are acting for your daughters and for future generations. And it makes me so glad.
Thank you.
It makes me so glad that we had to start somewhere. I'm glad that we did.
Thank you.